What's up everyone? Today I'm going to share a little story about my own procrastination to help you see a couple of things. One is my process for dealing with procrastination, how I overcome it, and because it's a regular occurrence in my life. And that's the second reason why I'm doing this, is to show you that no matter what the gurus pretend to be like, everybody procrastinates on the scary things. And it's an ongoing maintenance process for us to manage it and to deal with it. I won't go into the story in too much detail, but basically last week I procrastinated. Actually, I've been procrastinating for a couple of weeks now on attending my first Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu class. And I've been putting it off. It's far away from me. It's about a 45-minute travel to test it out. I've done martial arts before, but I've probably never done something quite this rough and physical. And I've just been putting it off. And last week was a chance to go to the first class, and I had like this mini breakdown where I had a big fantasy about how terrible it would have been to have gone, and managed to talk myself out of going. And that's what procrastination is. Essentially, you talking yourself out of doing it. Just a slight delay. It's all that's needed. Fear can make you delay something for years by just making you put it off one day at a time. And that's what my fear was doing. So that's one of the first key points that I'm making here, is that all procrastination is fear-based. And when you start with that understanding, it makes it easier to deal with. Because now you know what your enemy is. I don't want to say your fear is your enemy, but that's kind of what it is. So procrastination, not only is it super common to the point where every single person on the planet engages in it regularly, it is based in fear. And sometimes it's a helpful fear. Your fear is trying to prevent you from doing something that's pointless or lacks value. But most of the time, it's fear of discomfort. It's fear of doing something that is valuable for you, that is aligned with your integrity, but sucks to do or is scary to do or just doesn't feel good. Okay? So I'm going to talk now. There's a 7-step process basically that I go through to deal with procrastination, and it came out through this example. First and foremost, you have to admit that you're procrastinating. That's step number 1. You have to face the truth that you are choosing to delay an important piece of behavior. Okay? And I like to admit it publicly. So what I did last week is I sent an email out to my email list telling them the story about how I procrastinated. And not only did I send this email, I sent it before I'd actually fixed the problem. So I'm being open and vulnerable, and I'm also holding myself to account. Here I am, this wannabe confidence coach guy. Who am I to be dishonest about procrastination? And if I really want to live up to my own expectations of myself, I have to make sure that those expectations are open and known. So publicly admitting it, or telling your girlfriend about it, or admitting to your boss that you've been putting the task off, admit that you've been procrastinating and call it procrastination. Own it, be responsible for it. I chose not to do this thing, not something stopped me or it's this or that or the other. As I could have done it, I didn't. Simple as that. Get to that point, face the guilt. Second point, step number 2, is you need to not only acknowledge that this was based in fear, but you've got to figure out what you're afraid of. Whether that fear is real or fantastical, whether it was something that will genuinely hurt, from experience and good evidence that it will hurt, or it's something you think will hurt because your brain's just panicking about a new situation. All procrastination is fear. Figure out why you're afraid of it. Face the fear rather than trying to run away from it, which is what procrastination is. So when I looked at my situation with the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, I looked at the fantasies I had in my head of being humiliated in the class, of being severely injured. Some of this was based in fact and some was based in fiction. I've done lots of martial arts before, and the rougher ones I did get injured. I did get hurt sometimes. And the awkwardness that I was afraid of, this is in Czech Republic, they don't speak English a lot here. I was afraid that I'd be in this kind of dumb mute in the class who can't communicate with anyone and would be embarrassed and left out. So this is what I was afraid of. I was afraid of pain and injury and violence. And I was afraid of social awkwardness. And there's also a little bit of hassle of fear in there. I'm someone who's really, really not into hassle. I'm such a lazy guy. So the idea of driving for a long distance, dealing with a city where I'm still not really sure how the road rules work, so I'd have to go by myself this time. Finding parking in the city, which is, I could murder people over my rage about finding parking. You know, these things I was afraid of as well, because I knew they're quite real. I knew that those were realistic barriers I'd have to face. So I just faced my fear, that's all it was. Step 3 is you have to decide whether you're in or you're out. Okay? Hell yes versus hell no. Procrastination is maybe. Maybe I'll do it later. That's what procrastination is. It can be surprisingly beneficial to genuinely quit the thing. To say, you know what, this procrastination, I'm not going to do it. Or to say, well, I'm going all in. I'm definitely going to do it. But not this maybe one day thing. The reason for this is because, confidence dies in maybe. It's my favorite quote from myself, right? Confidence dies in maybe. One day, maybe, when I can afford it, after this other thing happens, that's where your confidence goes to die. That's where your integrity goes to die. You need the guilt and the fear of missing out from quitting something in order to be sufficiently motivated to actually follow through on it sometimes. So either quit it or go into it, but nothing in between. So after you've figured out you're afraid of it, decide, am I going to let this fear beat me or not? Not, will I one day deal with this fear? Okay? You're allowed to quit, and you've got to give yourself permission to as well, because pressure to do something, even from yourself, will trigger that anti-authority thing you've got in you. You know how you don't like other people telling you what to do? Well, you don't even like being told by yourself what to do, right? So make sure you've always got the ability to quit. Okay, it's surprising, it's counterintuitive, but if you're allowed to quit, you're less likely to. If you're forced to do something, you're more likely to quit. So give yourself the out. If you are going to quit, quit fully. Give up the attempt entirely, completely wipe it off your calendar, quit your job, whatever it is you need to do to avoid doing that task, and then see how you feel. You may change your mind to a hell yes later on. Step number 4, and this is if you've gone hell yes, your first step is to remove all controllable barriers. Make this thing as easy as possible to do, okay? For me, with the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu thing, I contacted the class to see if they could handle me being an English speaker. I found the address and I got the map all planned out. I had a look on Google to find parking. I got some clothing that will be comfortable to work out in. And most importantly, mentally, I gave myself the permission to quit and to take it at my own pace and so on and so forth. So I just removed all pressure and as many of the physical barriers or hassles as I possibly could. Okay. The next one's going even further. So step 5 is what I call quantum parts courage, which is where you break the thing down into its tiniest parts and then you oblige yourself to only do one part at a time. So the tiniest part for my jiu-jitsu was first to send a Facebook message to the class organizer to ask if it was okay for me to come and attend a beginner lesson. So when I did this, I also did it with no obligation to go beyond that task. The task, the big process of going to my first jiu-jitsu class was broken down to the tiniest possible level, which is just send them a message. Then when that one was done, it was just figure out how to get there on Google. And then when that one was done, so on, so on, so on. And I got all the way to parking in front of the building. Okay, that's done. Now, find out, I got there nice and early too. That's one of the best barrier removals, is make sure you're not rushing. So I got there nice and early, find out where in the building the class is. I just went and did some recon, came back, reassessed. Do I still want to go here? Yep, I do. And then I went through the class. I followed someone, I made it as easy as possible for myself. And so I actually jumped into step 6 there, which is take one step without obligation. Constantly allow yourself to quit after each step. You'll be amazed at how much that actually motivates you to continue, as opposed to being obliged to do this massive Mount Everest overwhelming size of a task. Realizing that big mountain is just steps, and you only have to do one step at a time. And step 7 is keep repeating this until you either fail or you complete it. That's it. Just all those ones, removing the barriers, breaking it down, taking the tiny step. So even the tiny step of driving to the class is broken down into get into the car, start the car up. There's all these tiny steps, and if you just keep focusing on the next tiny step, The overwhelmed feeling goes away. Once the overwhelmed feeling goes away, you can figure out, am I procrastinating because I'm scared of this thing and it's valuable, or am I procrastinating because this thing's a waste of my time, I shouldn't be doing it in the first place? Okay. So that's my 7-step process, and in case you're wondering, yes, I did go to the jiu-jitsu class, and some of my fears came true. They didn't speak English at all, basically, and I was kind of left miming and trying to guess what they're doing. It was way more physically difficult than I thought it was going to be, and I got my ass kicked. Like all the sparring sessions, these beginners were just destroying me. I was tapping out left, right, and center, and I thoroughly enjoyed it, and I'll be going back again. So that's my process for dealing with procrastination. I have to do it on a regular basis, even though I'd consider myself a highly motivated and determined individual in general, and I get a lot of shit done. There's still times where I hit the barrier and I hit the wall and I start delaying. Remember the key points. It's only fear. There's no real reason why you procrastinate. There's just fear. I'll see you guys next time. Cheers.